About a year and a half back, I heard this buzz about mirrorless cameras and the prophecies that it could probably be DSLR killers or would replace the DSLRs completely in future. This is Fujifilm X100S mirrorless camera. One important feature of X100S is that it's a fixed lens camera. It's a 23mm lens for the kind of sensor it's got. It gives out a 35mm focal length equivalent of a 35mm camera. For me, 35mm focal length on this camera was not a limitation. For me, it was more like a creative parameter. So the way I started seeing projects which I was doing with this particular camera, be it the environmental portraits or like travel pictures, I started thinking of compositions well in advance. I was like pre-visualizing my shots. It's a complete paradigm shift from using DSLR cameras. Like what you can clearly see is that there is no conventional DSLR mode in this. There's nothing called as AMPS setting for aperture, manual, programmed and shutter priority. This is the aperture ring control, which is right on top of the lens, right next to the focusing ring. This is the shutter control dial, and this is the exposure compensation dial, which goes 2 full stops on either sides. If you set the shutter speed to A, auto, and then you control the aperture using the ring, it's aperture priority. And if you set the aperture to auto along with the shutter being set at auto, it becomes the program mode. It also gives great in-camera JPEGs, and Fuji historically had made some great slide films like Velvia, Provia and Astia. They have these simulation modes for color of Velvia and Provia and Astia as part of JPEG color settings in this, along with a couple of other film simulations. And for somebody who's shooting in RAW, there is a lot of detail in the RAW files of this camera. I mean, I can show you certain examples where what I've seen in very tricky lighting condition is not what probably a RAW image which straight off the camera look like. So I've been able to recover all those blown out highlights and dark shadow areas. The sensors in the high-end DSLR probably produce such raw images, but something at this price range, I was quite blown by the quality of it. Since this camera has got a fixed lens and you can't really change the lens, one of the unique features of this lens is that it's got an internal leaf shutter, and that has a lot of advantages, and somehow I've found to use this the most. With leaf shutter, you can actually sync external flash with almost any shutter speed of your camera. Like DSLRs mostly are limited to a maximum shutter speed of 1/160 or 200, and I have exploited this feature a lot for environmental portraits where I've used artificial lights with ambient lighting to create dramatic lightings in portraits. This camera has got an inbuilt neutral density filter, which you don't really have to attach another filter on top of the lens, so you can control a few stops with the ND filter in this. So, and it has a function button here where you can give any particular function to this button. I've given a neutral density filter on and off toggling function to this. You can actually have one more mode in this camera. When you press this button here, it goes into something called as a silent mode, where you don't have the focusing sound, nor do you have the shutter sound, and you also can't use the flash. So this mode helps in many situations, like probably you're shooting in temples or churches or a lot of other places where sound would be not welcome. One of the drawbacks of mirrorless cameras is the battery life. If you're a huge DSLR user, you can probably pull in a DSLR with some 900 shots with a single battery, but that's not the case with mirrorless cameras. With the camera, when you get it out of the box, you get this camera case, which kind of fits very well with the design of this lens. But when you get the official adapter and the lens, and then you try to attach the lens cap, it's not that sturdy sometimes, it just falls off many times. Now for X100 users, what Fujifilm has done is that they have released 2 conversion adapters, lens conversion adapters for X100S. One is called the WCL X100, which basically makes the effective focal length for this lens into 28mm focal length of a 35mm camera. And recently they've released another much awaited conversion kit. It is the TCL X100. Basically, when you when you fix that adapter to this lens, it makes it an effective 50mm focal length lens on a 35mm camera. So in a way, a Fujifilm X100S owner, if he gets both those adapters, it's like having one camera with 3 prime lens kit, 28mm, 35mm and 50mm. The maximum aperture f2 still remains the same, and it's still got the internal leaf shutter. So it's really a very creative gear.